All right. Welcome to the September 16, 2020 regular meeting of the Lake Bluff Joint Plan Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals. We've got a full agenda tonight. I'm glad all of the commissioners are present. We'll start with agenda item number 1, call to order and roll call.
Certainly. Member Burns.
Here.
Member Russell.
Present.
Member Miller, I believe, has not joined us yet. Member Danley. Member Danley.
Here. Can you hear me?
Cool. Yep, we can hear you. Member Ryder.
Here.
Member Murray.
Here.
And Chair Peters.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2, which we consider to be a non-agenda item, is to address public comment time, allowing 15 minutes at the beginning of our meeting to for any of the citizenry to approach the board, so to speak. We allocate 5 minutes for each presentation. Do you know, Mr. Cole, whether or not we have any tonight?
I'm not seeing any at this moment. We do have a number of people tuning in, so if you are on Zoom, if you'd like to speak, you can use the Q&A function at the bottom. If you're joining us by phone, and I can see at least one person is, you can dial *9 if you'd like to speak at this point in the agenda. We'll give it a few seconds, and then otherwise we'll keep making that offer periodically through the different items on our agenda.
All right, I'm here.
All right. Good. Agenda item number 3, consideration of the August 19, 2020 PCZBA regular meeting minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review those minutes?
Yes. I will say that Member Miller did forward on some corrections that we would ask to be included in the adopted set.
Okay. Any other proposed corrections or other revisions by the board members?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have several. Glenn, on page 3 of the minutes, the large paragraph in the middle of the page,
Yeah.
next to the last sentence, says Member Russell requested a condition that when construction starts, the contractor is required to immediately lower the sidewalk to the west of the property. And what I requested and what the motion was, or should have included, was that they had to, because the yard was getting substantially disturbed next door, that the restoration proceed once that walk work was done post haste. So you can dress that one up.
Most certainly.
And then on page 5, the second sentence from the top, it really should read, Member Russell said that this project does not impact neighborhood drainage, and will not change the problem of existing flooding. He said the only potential flood hazard is to the homeowner themselves. And then page 6, the second sentence from the top, the statement, Chair Peters added that this is assuming that the FAR is not succeeded, it should be exceeded. And then on the last page of the minutes, the third line from the top, the discussion was about for a rental period to be a minimum 6 months, not to be a specific time. And then Chair Peters, correct me if I'm wrong, the next paragraph, this first sentence says, Chair Peters said he's reluctant for ADUs to be a permitted use I think what you said, Gary, was that you were reluctant to have the permitted use of ADAs in the higher density district, and you were comfortable with them in the country estate districts, or something to that flavor.
You're probably correct on that, Member Russell, because I think I did express that I was comfortable with the ADUs in an estate area. So it's a very, very.
Ed,
Thank you. Any other comments from the commissioners? Hearing none, could we have a motion, please?
I'll motion to accept the minutes as revised.
Second?
Is there a second?
second,
Thank you. All in favor?
This will need to be a roll call, though,
Roll call?
Mr. Chairman. Yes. Member Burns,
Aye.
Member Russell,
aye,
Member Miller,
Aye.
Member Danley,
Aye.
Member Ryder,
Aye.
Member Murray,
Aye.
and Chair Peters.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Agenda item number 4, Mr. Cole, do you want to give us a brief presentation?
Most certainly. So happy to keep this item brief unless the members of the commission would like a more thorough explanation. In short, the Historic Preservation Commission has been working for some time to revise the village's preservation regulations. And so that's to align those regulations with its, if you would, its historic preservation plan. It calls for the introduction of historic districts, the realignment of certain delay periods before a historic structure can be torn down in the village, and other changes that were explained in a letter circulated to you from Chairman Steve Krause. That set of changes is talked about in your, or at least not directly talked about, but that ordinance is talked about as one facet of your comprehensive plan regarding housing. The ordinance itself, not within the zoning code, no public hearing required before this body. However, there is a small piece of interaction there. Our tree regulations do provide a bonus, if you would, a reduction in fees where you have a landmark structure and you're removing trees to build a conforming addition. In this case, because there are other types of landmark protection introduced, there's a different terminology now. Instead of referring to the word landmark specifically, which is just one type, essentially we're trading that language out to say a protected feature, which refers to any of the different ways that a property could be subject to those regulations. Again, happy to answer any questions about the HPC's larger work or this particular text amendment that's before you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Any discussion among the commissioners with respect to this proposal? Any idea, Mr. Cole, as to how many times per year we'll be looking at a reduction in fees associated with this proposed amendment?
I did not research that specifically. I'm not aware of such an addition being built that would have come before our body for advisory review since I've been with the village. That would be 3.5 years. And so there wouldn't have been a chance in there that comes to mind for that reduction to take place.
And I'm
Presumption that, excuse me, Gary, I'm sorry. My presumption that we reduce fees so that the protected building is allowed to stay on the property with the additions.
Yeah, it's an incentive to landmark the property.
Thank you.
So ordinarily without, if it wasn't a landmark, even under this circumstance, you would only pay 50% of the tree removal fees. In this case, that incentive is that you wouldn't have to pay for that addition if you had to take down one or more trees to do it.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the commissioners with respect to this? Hearing none, is there a motion, please?
I'd like to recommend that
Chair
the village
Peters.
board adopt the
Chair
text
Peters.
amendment as presented, modifying the tree regulations.
Thank you, Member Russell.
If I may, Chair Peters, before
Certainly.
you entertain the motion, my suggestion would be, because it's a public hearing, to see if there's anybody from the public who would like to provide testimony.
Thank you. Yeah, following Mr. Schuster's recommendation, is there anyone from the public who would like to provide testimony on this issue?
At this moment, I'm not seeing any. Again, if you'd like to comment, you can use the Q&A function if you're joining us via Zoom, or you can dial *9, star and the number 9, or if you are joining us by phone. And again, I'm still not seeing anyone who wishes to comment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Hearing none, we can proceed probably with a second to Member Russell's motion. Is there a second?
I second his motion.
Thank you, Member Murray. Any further discussion? Hearing none, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Certainly. From here on out, the order is random, as always. Member Ryder?
Aye.
Member Danley?
Aye.
Member Burns?
Aye.
Member Murray?
Aye.
Member Russell?
Aye.
Member Miller?
Aye.
Chair Peters?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Agenda item number 5, a public hearing regarding 714 Birch Road. Mr. Cole, if you could give us a presentation or overview of that petition.
Certainly. So I think I will put up just one image for the good of the order. This is a very straightforward side yard subdivision necessary to build an emergency natural gas generator for emergency power. This is within your authority to grant directly, so many variations are of a magnitude that they are referrals to the village board. In this case, because the only variation necessary is less than 25% of the underlying standard, specifically 7/10 of a foot from a 5-foot setback for accessory structures. It's within your purview directly to grant or deny this request for relief. So the applicant has provided some statements in their application that speak to this. Again, the existing setback in this area is 7.7 feet. They need to have 5 feet for an accessory structure such as this. They're proposing to build that at a 4.3-foot setback. And they've provided a number of statements, pictures, things like that in their application. So scrolling down, you can see here, this is Birch Road to the east. This is the front of their property. And this is a general sketch of the generator. The specific dimensions are all provided of the concrete pad, and the generator itself are all provided in your application materials.
Glenn, do you have a diagram here that shows the location of the neighboring home on the other side of that fence line?
I do not have one here in the packet, but certainly I can provide you one in just a moment.
Is the petitioner accessible?
Yes, I see Miss Deborah Digby here, who I will promote up. I'm not seeing Mr. David Digby here. I'm not sure if he's, we're sharing a Zoom or not. Yeah, we have both here. If you could, hello, if you could state your names for the record.
Yeah, so this is Deborah Digby.
Hi, David Digby.
Okay. There we go.
And then I'll pull up that diagram here in a moment if, I don't know if you'd like the petitioner to speak while I do that.
Sworn in.
Yes, that would be very important.
Mr. and Mrs. Digby, do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
We did.
We do.
Thank you. If you could, give us a brief overview of your petition. For the benefit of the commissioners, we will adopt and incorporate by reference all of the documents that you've submitted and the various responses that you have made to the standards for variation. But if you wanted to give us a quick overview, that would be great, along with any communication you've had with your neighbor or neighbors. That would be appreciated.
Yep, of course, Mr. Peters. So we've since we lived in the property, we've been here for approximately 5 years. We've experienced several power failures. A couple whilst we've been here, a couple whilst we've been away. The result of those power failures, which have been impacting us for several hours, we've had 3 to 4 fairly significant impacts on our basement property. So we have a sump pump, actually 2 sump pumps. We also have a battery. The challenge has always been that the batteries kind of run out of power. So we've had one very significant flood here, which resulted in several $1,000s worth of damage. So as a result of being on the receiving end of several of those, we elected to look into installing a generator, as outlined previously. We have spoken to our neighbors. We know the Josephs very well. And we also provided some documentation and also some correspondence we've had with the Josephs, who are understanding and accepting and have no issues with us in putting the generator in place. They understand where it's going to be, and so they're supportive. They don't have any issues from their side. So I did supply in the package that I sent back to yourselves. The documentation in there is an email that Phil sent to me.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Digby. Commissioners, whoever would like to start the discussion or the questioning, that would be great.
Glenn, do you have the, I'm assuming you went to the Lake County site to try and pull up an aerial of the 2 properties?
Yes, sir. So I'll display this for everyone's benefit. We'll turn off the topography here to make it a little cleaner. You'll notice that in just the way that aerial photography works, this is at the towards the edge of their photo run. So you'll see that there's some displacement here. You can tell looking at this face of the wall how it stretches out, even though this is a vertical wall. So note that this is misaligned to this parcel line, but I think illustrative of some of the spacing you have there.
Yeah, so Glenn it's probably hard for everyone to really see in the aerials, but just for the record, I think we should note that, the applicant was saying that the driveway was going to be the generator was going to be in a location that would be opposite the adjacent property to the north to their driveway, and it's actually not. It's going to be adjacent to that open yard. Zoom back a little bit, Glenn. The front garage wall of that property to the north is further to the east than the eastern point of the wall along which the generator is going to be, and then the driveway is all east of that. So just so it's clear for the record, it's not really adjacent to the neighbor's driveway. And the other somewhat point of concern is there's no real dimension as to where the generator is along that east wall. It's just kind of sketched in there as the generator would move west along that north wall. I mean, it does, as you can see, get very close to the neighbor's house. So I don't know if we can get some sort of distance range that this generator would stay east on that northerly wall because the further east it is, the further away from the neighbor's home it is.
Mr. Digby, can you address Member Russell's question with respect to approximate or actual location?
Sure. So my wife's literally just popping outside now to get some dimensions. So I don't want to misspeak, but it's a reasonable distance. That it's like 10 to 15 feet away from the property. And my understanding is, whilst it's loosely located on the diagram, the way in which the adjacent property is situated, it's more towards the corner. So the front, I guess, east corner of their house and the driveway. And it should be noted that it's shielded by not only shrubs that are on our side, but also evergreens or conifers that are on the Joseph side as well.
Yeah, so I can just add a bit more detail to that. So their driveway that goes up to the house, and you're right, it's not adjacent to that bit, but they then have a pull-in bit to the left of their driveway where they park their cars. And then there's like a yard bit. It's not next to the house, and they don't use it, but you can actually walk around to the back of the house there. And that's where the generator is. So it's away from any of their buildings.
I did supply some photographs as well at various different angles of approximately where the generator will be relative to our neighbor's property.
Let me ask you, I mean, did you exhaust all other areas on the placement of it? I mean, I know generators have to be close to the connections and everything else. So is this hearing it from the experts that are telling you where it should go, or tell us a little bit about why?
Yeah, so it's explored it has to go on that side of the house, because you're right, because of the connections. But our difficulty or our challenge is that we have windows and it can't go beneath the window. We also have our other equipment there, the air conditioning units. So they take up a space that doesn't have a window. So this is really our only option for one. And that was on the advice of the company.
And if I may interject, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly.
Mr. Digby, you referenced an email in there, I believe, from the Josephs. I am, for certain, here in the packet, I didn't include that. I'm looking back in our correspondence and I'm not seeing that. Perhaps while we're talking, if you can forward that to me real quick, I'm happy to put that up on the screen. We can make sure that's in the record. Sorry about that.
Yeah, sure. I'll try to find it.
Yeah, so David's going to his laptop now to see if he can locate the email.
When the generator is on or activated, do you know how many decibels of sound it creates?
I have no idea of that, no.
The specs for the generator in the packet say 67 decibels.
And what does that equate to, Mr. Russell?
I don't have that information, Chair Peters.
Okay, I think 67.
I don't think it's any louder than, I think a lawnmower is louder.
I think when you get up toward 90 or 95 or 100, that's when it gets to be rather noisy.
Yeah. Just to move it along, I guess the dimension that the variation that's being requested is so de minimis that it's not going to make any difference in the sound. I'm assuming they have to be like a foot off the house, and that's why from a building code perspective, and that's why they're encroaching just a little bit, because the generator is only 28 inches wide. But I'd feel comfortable as long as they can say that the generator isn't going to be more than 16 feet down from that wall there along the north side of their house is 33 feet long. And if they're not more than 16 feet west of the northeast corner of their home there, that would, keep it keep it away from the neighbor. I just think there should be some sort of, generic dimension that, and we're not just relying on a little pencil mark on a survey without any dimensions.
Well, just to the west of where the proposal is a window, and then we have a bank of windows. So we really can't go any further west anyway.
So you're willing to agree to that 16-foot maximum constraint?
Well, I'd have to measure it exactly.
That's halfway down the wall. Your wall is 33 feet long.
Oh yeah, it's nowhere near halfway. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have any other questions then.
Thank you, Member Russell. Member Burns.
Yeah, I have no further questions. Again, I agree with George in that, the variation that they're asking for is certainly not going to change anything from a noise perspective. They seem to have it well shielded. And my hope, aside from just, the regular maintenance to turn it on, hopefully it's not used very often. I think they are dealing with hardship. It would be great if we could do something about it, but I don't think we can in regards to the flooding. I recently, after this last outage, got myself a personal generator, or not personal, a portable one, just because I didn't want to lose everything in my fridge and freezer and whatnot, and have my basement flooded. And they're obnoxious, they're loud, but in terms of protecting your house, I think it's something that is a necessity until we could guarantee that this kind of stuff isn't going to happen, which we can't. So I'm okay with it.
Thank you, Member Burns. Member Ryder.
Yes, it's significant to me that they've spoken with the Josephs to the north. I'd be interested in the email for the record, as Glenn points out. But I believe the two property owners have worked it out, and there's no reason for us to object given the reasonableness of the proposed change.
Thank you, Member Ryder. Member Danley.
No, absolutely. I think everyone has definitely touched on not only the hardship, but being neighborly and doing what we can to correct Mother Nature as best we can. So I would definitely vote to grant the requested relief. So.
Thank you. Member Murray?
No further comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Member Miller?
I have nothing else to add.
All right. And I concur with the comments of the commissioners. I think the only limitation is staying within that 16 feet to the northwest or to the west. But other than that, it seems like it's a very reasonable proposition. Any further discussion? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I move we recommend or approve the requested variation with the limitation that the generator along the north wall be within 16 feet of the northeast corner.
Thank you, Member Russell. Thank you, Member Burns. We could have a roll call vote, please.
Can I suggest? Can I suggest a slight amendment to the motion that the staff follow up on the email from the neighbor as a condition?
The email has not arrived yet.
So just to let you know, I've just sent a document through to Glenn to your email address. It's a PDF because the photographs are quite heavy. So you'll see 6 slides in there. 5 slides are visuals. The last slide is email communication with Phil. Joseph.
And sir, that may be the confusion. Happy to work with you on this later if we need to, but I am only seeing 5 pages in this PDF.
Okay. Well, I don't want to hold you guys up. I've literally just sent it through, so let me resend it again.
It's definitely there, I can see.
No, thank you very much.
Happens to the best of us. Well, we have.
I'd be happy to say that we delegate to the staff responsibility for following up on this, and we can move on.
Okay, without modifying the motion then, the motion that generated by Mr. Russell includes the one condition with respect to location.
And if I could, Mr. Chairman, to be clear, Mr. Russell, you intend for that to be the northeast corner of the building, correct?
Within 16 feet of the northeast corner of the building, yes, down that wall.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you. Any further discussion before we vote on the motion? Hearing none, could we have a roll call, please?
Certainly. Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Burns.
Aye.
Member Ryder.
Aye.
Member Miller.
Aye.
Member Murray.
Aye.
Member Danley. We weren't able to hear you. I apologize.
Aye.
And Chair Peters.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Any further guidance to Mr. and Mrs. Digby before we move on to agenda item number 6?
Yeah, so we'll be in touch most likely tomorrow. We'll get that email situation squared away. I'll have some paperwork for you to sign, then you can take your building permit.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Cole.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 6, if you could give us an overview, Mr. Cole, please.
Certainly. So this one is long time in the coming, I would say. It was a whole new world, a whole different world when we first heard about this back in February. This is the proposed new Jaguar dealership on the last undeveloped lot in the Lake Bluff Industrial Park or the Lake Bluff Business Park, if you prefer the new and improved name, which is addressed 39 to 47 Sherwood Terrace. So the application you have before you, I would say, is very similar to what you reviewed at your workshop in February. It's been subject to a couple changes from the Architectural Board of Review, but they made a positive recommendation at their meeting in March, right before the village had to stop public meetings and so on due to the pandemic. The only substantial change is in that span of time, that was right about the correct length of time for IDOT to return a negative set of plan comments on adding a ramp along a right-in, right-out ramp from Route 41 as a direct access to this property. So they've submitted a revised sheet AS1 that was provided, I believe, in 11 by 17 in your packet. It's also available online. That supersedes the full-size copy that's in your packet. We left that in there for detail and for scale if needed. The only comments I would say before we invite the petitioner forward is that in looking back at other automotive uses or automotive dealership special uses, certainly they have tended to have a lot of conditions from before the village put more regulations into place. We've given you a sample of maybe the most common ones you would wish to apply to this special use permit if you desired to. So happy to answer any initial questions about this special use or the two variations required for this course of development, or we can bring the petitioners forward.
I'd just like to say, before we recite that comment, that I would totally support the prohibition that there be no vehicle unloading on the shoulders of US Route 41. Automobiles, dealers do it all the time down in Highland Park. It is hazardous. and it shouldn't be tolerated by any community. And I would hope we would make that crystal clear in any approval, that to stop a trailer loaded with cars right on the shoulder of a highway like this shouldn't allow it.
Thank you, Member Russell. Are the petitioners, or is the petitioner available, please?
Yes, we have, and I've given them the ability to speak and to send video when they're ready. We have Jordan Aaron representing the dealership, the developer, and then Mr. Robert Flubacher is the architect of record.
Gentlemen, if you could state your names for the record, please, and then after that, I'll swear you in.
My name is Robert Flubacher, architect on the project.
Thank you. Mr. Ahrens?
I believe you're on mute, Mr. Ahrens.
I believe he is one of our callers. If your phone number ends in 0606, you should be able to speak.
Mr. Ahrens?
And sir, you may need to dial, I have to look at the guide here, *6 to unmute yourself.
There we go. So Jordan Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Aaron. Mr. Aaron and Mr. Flubacher, if you could just, we'll give you an oath. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, sir? Sirs?
I do.
Yeah, I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Flubacher, if you want to share your screen and make your presentation, you can. I have your plan set here if you'd like me to put up any particular plan sheet as we go.
I'll use your exhibits if you don't mind. And if you could put up the most current AS1, that would be helpful.
Most certainly.
Mr. Cole, do you by any chance have access to the rendering that was submitted back in February?
If you give me just a moment, I can pull that up, sure. Of course, it's the world's slowest loading bar. What do you expect? Technology. It's a proper unveiling suspense.
Almost there.
The little loading bar that could. Apologize, I'll take just one more moment here.
I could begin while we wait, I think. Just a quick history of the project. The Aaron family owns the current Imperial Motors Jaguar that is roughly two lots to the north of this proposed lot. Throughout many years, Jaguar has been developing prototypical branding for their dealerships. We have gone in front of the village, I want to say maybe 5 years ago, with a completely different design for remodeling to the existing Imperial Motors facility. And since Jaguar has changed their branding once again, and the most practical way to develop this dealership in the current branding is to build a new building rather than remodel the existing building. So what you're seeing tonight is our proposal of the new project. A little over, I believe it's 25,000 square feet, if I remember correctly, or maybe closer to 30,000 square foot facility. It's a one-story facility with a mezzanine inside of it. The face of the building is to Route 41 for obvious reasons, for more visible customer visibility of the front facade of the building. It has a very striking front facade with a tall window wall facing the highway. Vehicles are meant to be displayed inside there and lit at night rather than lighting the lot at night. So as you drive by the highway, you'll be seeing into the showroom. The rest of the property is developed with on-site parking, landscaping, and miscellaneous items for the use of the building. I have to chuckle because when we first came through here, the quarantine area on the property was just a fact because of the batteries in the cars, but now the quarantine takes on a whole different meaning. But there's a section of the property that electric vehicles that have been in accidents need to be stored. And that's in the upper left corner of the property. Other than that, the lot development is pretty straightforward and on that plan. And rather than a lengthy presentation, I'd rather entertain questions if you have any.
And we'll adopt and incorporate by reference, obviously, your petition into the record.
I was noticing in the packet, there's something got kind of goofed up in the paperwork in the packet. If you look at there's part of the Digby application that's in our paperwork.
I apologize for that. So this was, just to state it clearly for the record, this was, if you have your printed copies, as a commissioner, you're fine. This is a lesson for me in technology. So when you have a fillable PDF form, when you try and put multiple of them together, whichever one you put in last, it copies to the other copies of the same form. Didn't know that. So the online version will be corrected.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Who of the commissioners would like to start?
Can we clarify, excuse me, Glenn, can you clarify what it exactly is we're approving tonight?
Sure. So in total, there are 3 distinct forms of relief before you. The first is that new automobile dealerships are a special use in the L1 district. So that's, for example, Chevy Exchange, Lake Forest Sports Cars, the current Jaguar dealership, and this proposed dealership. The second is, as you'll recall, there is a 50-foot parking setback from a U.S. state or public highway. And so that's very conveniently shown here as this 50-foot buffer from the right-of-way. And so to position these parking spaces within that buffer, they would require a variation. Finally, the last one is a little more technical. When you have the L1 regulations have rules about where you put your loading zones and where you face your loading docks. When you have, ordinarily they're to be to the rear of the building. When you have a through lot such as this, they're to be on the side of the building. So strictly speaking, these loading doors should face south to minimize their visibility. As you can see, this is the service bay for the property, and these, I believe it's a pull-through bay arrangement, and so they face to both front yards, if you would, of this through lot. So that is the special use and the two variations that you would have to grant for this dealership as proposed.
I have a question. Is there a door facing south that's not listed on the plans?
I believe there's a pedestrian door here, but not a vehicular door. I think we have some elevations showing that.
There might be a door that shows up, it's on that angle on the left side of that service right.
Yeah, right. I see. You know, there has to be a door off of Sherwood Place as well. Is that correct?
There are two doors directly below that door on the angle.
And go down. So there's doors coming in from 41 and there's doors coming in from Sherwood Terrace.
Yeah, the design of that area is service customers would arrive on the Route 41 side, enter in that door. Their vehicle will be left and either parked or brought into the service department. Also, customers will pick up their vehicles after service in this area and then exit towards Sherwood and exit the property that direction.
So if the car is driving in, the cars are driving in off of Sherwood, how do they get to the 41 door?
There'll be signage on the property. When you come in the drive off of Sherwood, you'll continue going straight east to the front of the property, turn right across the front of the showroom, and then turn right again to go into the service department.
So just in brief, the three things we are looking at, one of this being a car dealership is special use, that's a moot point. We have other car dealerships already approved. The parking with the loss of some space off of 41 is also moot because we allowed Chevy to have parking off the space within 50 feet on those pods that are facing 41. And I think the loading doors have to be because that's the design of the building. So unless there's something else there, I don't see any problem with this proposal.
Thank you, Member Miller. Member Burns.
I was just going to bring up a question similar to what Elliot had mentioned, and just for the record, because I think maybe some of the members on the board here weren't present when Chevy did come, but Glenn, do you remember how many vehicles they did park within the setback? I think it was 6 maybe, and then how far were they encroaching into the setback?
Yeah, I can, if you can give me a few minutes, I can give you an exact number there. I believe it was, a single-digit number, and that was really for vehicle display pads, not necessarily customer parking as shown here.
Yeah, but when we say single digits, you mean number of vehicles, right?
Yeah, number of pads, number of vehicles, and
but I think they were I think they were significantly into the right of way. So I guess from my perspective, a vehicle, whether it be in a parking or on a pod, it's close to the highway, and I don't think it's it's a similar quantity as what we're showing here with the dark gray encroachment triangles. So yeah, I mean, given the precedent, I don't see really that this is much different from that. That's the only part of it that I had a heartache or thought really that hard about, and I'm okay with that considering what we did with the Chevy property in particular. And I think as I kind of weigh the costs and benefits or pros and cons here, I'd rather have some lenience on this for a successful business on a state highway. We're not talking about a residential district or like the main corridor into our town up 176. So I think this is not really too much to give relief for. I'm in favor of it.
Thank you, Member Burns. Member Murray.
I remain supportive of the project as we discussed earlier in the year. I think it's great to see the planned investment in the community, and again, I think that Member Miller and Member Burns have covered a lot of the outstanding questions, and look forward to see the project proceed.
Thank you, Member Murray. Member Ryder.
Yes, I echo the comments of my peers. I support the project.
Thank you, Member Ryder. Member Danley.
I have no issues and I would support this project moving forward.
Thank you, Member Danley. Member Russell.
I'll just say at the beginning, I'm supportive of the variations that are requested. That variation on Highway 41 still provides for about 60 feet total lawn between the edge of highway and the furthest most protrusion into the 50-foot front yard setback. So it's more than ample, and I believe it is less than what's happening down the road at the Chevy dealership. I think the setbacks variations requested on the Sherwood Terrace side are minimal. I did miss the meeting in February when this was first talked about. And I'd just like to ask the applicant, is the request for a write-in or write-out still being pursued? And if you may share just very quickly, because IDOT's allowed these before, and because they hand them out like hotcakes down in Highland Park, I'm curious as to why it's being denied.
We are still pursuing the curb cut. There was a series of reasons that they gave for denying the request. One was that it was on the curve. The second was that 41 was considered a limited access highway, and they were trying to minimize the curb cuts. There was one other one that I can't remember what it was, but they were interesting arguments because all the existing curb cuts in this general area all violated those rules. We are pursuing it because in our mind, it really is one deceleration lane with two curb cuts off that single deceleration lane. So it's a minimal impact to the 41 exiting. So tonight, we'd actually like, if the board sees it fit, to kind of give your opinion either way. Should we get the curb cut? Is it acceptable? Or should we not get the curb cut? Is it acceptable?
I should mention, so this is, somewhat unorthodox to have two variations of the same site plan, but the Plan Commission has done similar things in the last couple of years. In this case, it is even better in that you do have two versions of of that sheet AS1 that show this plan with and without that potential curb cut. So if you were to recommend to us a condition that the applicant be allowed to provide that curb cut, perhaps by resolution of the village board, that would be consistent with some of those arrangements we've made in the past. Also, Member Burns, to your previous comment, your previous question, up on the screen is the Chevy Exchange site plan. This is like 7 display pads. I'm sure some of that parking behind it is also within that 50-foot setback, probably the subject of a prior variation before that.
Thank you, Glenn.
Yeah, when we had that informal presentation back in February, or maybe it was late 2019, I was very impressed by the presentation Jaguar has been a very, very professional and responsible member of the community, so to speak. And I, like my fellow commissioners, take the same position that generally it's an excellent presentation. It's been reviewed by the ABR. I'm sure that there will be considerable foliage and landscaping and everything else around the property. So from my perspective, the only caveat would be just the unloading scenario that Member Russell had raised earlier. And I think that would probably be a condition for approval. But I'm totally supportive of the presentation of the petition and disappointed that the state did not allow you, at least at present, right in, right out access.
We have not given up.
We have not given up. This is Jordan Aaron. I mean, if there's any assistance we could achieve from the village with support for the right in, right out, we'd really appreciate it. That's number one. Number two, I wholly agree with Mr. Russell on unloading on 41. Whenever we have a transporter pull up, we always make them go around to Sherwood. So I'm in agreement with that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Aaron. Any further discussion among the commissioners?
Well, I don't know if we've individually addressed, but I just like for the record, I am supportive of the, I guess, condition to allow the curb cut if they do get approval, to allow that to administratively be added if and when that does get approved.
Thank you, Member Burns.
I concur with that also.
Oh, go ahead, George.
Just add, I concur with what Dave Burns just said.
Thank you. Mr. Schuster, we might need a little assistance as to how we handle the two different scenarios, one with the curb cut, one without the curb cut. But I think as a general proposition, the motion should be relatively straightforward, but you might want to help us out a little bit.
Yeah, so when making the motion, I think all you want to do is make sure that you say, recommend approval with or without the curb cut, and just state what, who's ever making the motion, if you're supportive of both, that will be in your recommendation. And then I would also add to the motion, if you're going to recommend approval of both as proposed with the curb cut and proposed without a curb cut, that the village administratively approve the curb cut if it comes at a later date. So that all can be part of your motion. The other thing I just want to remind us to make sure we do is if there's anybody from the public who has any more testimony based on the evidence that's just been presented, you may want to just confirm there's nobody else who would like to speak, and if there is, take their testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Schuster.
And on that note, we have no one else participating by phone. If we were to have someone participating by Zoom who would want to speak, you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Suppose we'll give it a moment to make sure there's no one else. Not seeing anyone, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Yeah, hearing no further comment from the public, do we have a motion, please?
Make the motion to approve as stated, including with and without a curb cut.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Mr. Miller, is it your intent that your motion include the condition about loading on Route 41?
No unloading or loading on Route 41. Correct.
And Elliot, does your motion also include the ability for the board to administratively approve it at a later, if it's approved at a later date?
That's included in the motion. Do we have to have a separate motion about that?
No, I just
Nope,
want to
you
make
can-
sure that that was clear, because you said with or without, and I thought Ben said that we also need to recommend that they administratively can
Yeah,
do
I
it
would-
without, is that right?
I would recommend if you want it, you could do it either, either the board could do the approval of the curb cut or staff, but that should be part of your motion if you desire it to be so.
Well, I would make it staff. Just makes it easier than having to go back to the board for that.
So to clarify the motion, it's to recommend approval of the application, both with a curb cut and without a curb cut, with the condition that there will be no unloading or loading on 41, and that staff have the authority to approve a curb cut at a later date without
As
further
he said, I agree.
for this body.
Well, you're the lawyer and I'm not. Yes.
And we have a second from Member Murray, correct?
That's correct.
Any further discussion? If we could have a roll call vote, please.
Most certainly. Member Miller,
Aye.
Member Ryder,
Aye.
Member Danley,
Aye.
Member Murray,
Aye.
Member Burns,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
and Chair Peters.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
Right. Agenda item number 7. If you could give the group an overview, Mr. Cole, please.
Certainly. Give me
Yeah.
just one moment here.
Glenn, before you jump in, Mr. Chairman, as I mentioned previously, I'm going to excuse myself for the remainder of the evening, but specifically on the issue number 7, where I have a personal relationship with the proprietor, and hence think it's probably best if I sit that one out.
No, thank you, Mr. Murray. Thank you for the heads up earlier in the week.
Mr. Murray,
All right.
would you like to rejoin us for the last agenda item?
I'm unable to rejoin the rest of this evening. I have to get on a work call in about 10 minutes. But I will certainly read about the workshop in the minutes.
Thank you, Member Murray.
Have a good evening.
You also. All right.
So with that said, we can move on to our next item, which is, in short, an expansion request at Prairie Espresso. So as you know, the Center Avenue Partners property has a great deal of zoning relief associated with it, a number of restaurants, as well as parking variations in the rear. You'll remember this body dealt with this earlier this year. I guess within the last year 3 times. The first was the expansion of the new sandwich shop as part of the bicycle shop space. The second was the proposed Lawrence Pub as a reconfiguration of the unused bank, ATM, and drive-through in the rear of the adjoining property to the east. And then the third was reconfiguring Innovasi to add that retail area, to add that basement bar cache, and then also to move the bicycle shop and that associated restaurant to a different tenant space in the property. So this is the 4th time that this group has considered this property in recent memory. In this case, Mr. John Davis, wrong John, has an existing small coffee shop that serves that alley, that pedestrian walk-through alley that's provided between the Lawrence property to the east and the Center Avenue Partners property to the west. they're looking to expand into the 79 East Scranton Avenue tenant space. So there's, the application talks a bit about, you know, their proposed use, and they've provided some statements in their application. If it helps the group, while I talk through a couple of these things I'm going to put up, we recently received a proposed menu from Mr. Davis regarding the liquor license component of this. So again, there's a zoning part and liquor part. This is for the liquor side of it, but I'll share it in case there's, that's helpful for understanding the concept. But essentially, they're proposing, or they're looking to bring that existing business inside to add food service, limited food service, really more appetizers, small dishes, not to build out a commercial kitchen as we understand it, and very similar to their existing operation. I would provide a couple comments as we're moving forward. So one is we shared 2 letters with the Plan Commission in the original packet received from Gary Lawrence, who's a property owner to the east, as well as the proprietors of Bluffington's, which is a tenant in the Lawrence property, again, lying to the east of this property. We also received 2 more letters within the last 24 hours or so that were shared with the PCZBA by email. Again, happy to recirculate those if necessary. And this menu is also a bit of new information we're sharing with you as well. In those letters, I mean, certainly in our staff review, of course, we're sensitive to parking in this area. In those letters, I would say many of them focus on parking concerns here. So I would volunteer at least 3 points to really summarize the additional information put in the packet. The first is that Rich and Associates are planning parking study in this district is relatively recent. It says and remains that, you know, when originally conducted, it believes there's a surplus of about 45 stalls in this area. Even taking into account some of the changes that have happened since 2014, we think that's still in the neighborhood of 30. Certainly, I would love to bring you additional data to vet out if that's true or if it's not. But of course, unfortunately, it's in a global pandemic where there are a great many differences to how everyone conducts business. And so I don't know that we as staff can bring you valid data right now, both because of that and because of the changes that haven't happened yet, but have been approved by this body. The second thing I would say is, you know, we're happy to have greater discussions about parking if we need to. To what extent that happens tonight, you know, that may be a bigger planning conversation, and also to some extent, I would hate to have that with a member recused because of a conflict on this particular application. I would also say that, you know, parking factors into this application, but the application is really what's before us tonight. The last thing I did want to address directly is in some of the letters we received are specifically concerned with, you know, parking violations or perhaps a lack of enforcement in that area. We are on a bit of short notice, but we did go back through and try to pull together some statistics about that. So in the span of 3 months, our last, if you would, regular 3 months, so the period from November 1st, 2019 to February 29th, 2020, we wrote 54 citations for parking related matters in the downtown. That's parking over time, that's parking improperly over the line, wrong side of the road, things like that. But again, that's, you know, multiple tickets a week. And for each one of those citations that's being issued, that's warnings, that's patrols. I do want to emphasize that we are actively enforcing parking in this area. Of course, since then, that hasn't been the case. Since March 1st to September 10th, we've only written about 16 tickets. And so some of that is because there has been less parking to cause violations. And of course, some of that is it hasn't been our biggest enforcement priority. Of course, bearing in mind the hardships that some of our businesses have had due to coronavirus and the desire to have a supportive place for our customers to visit our downtown. Again, we can't be everywhere. We can't catch everybody, but I did want to answer that directly with the help of our police department to say that we are doing our best to monitor for violations in this area and to make sure this parking is used for its intended purpose, which is short and medium-term visitors to our businesses. Happy to answer any questions before we turn it over to the petitioners.
Yeah, Glenn, I have a question that I think might be to everyone's benefit, both on the board and for anyone listening. The comment that the consultant, when he did their study in 2014, that they found that there was a surplus of 45 stalls in the downtown area, and I think that statement by itself would probably leave anyone that heard it think that they must have done the survey in a different town. But I think what the important point to clarify, if I recall correctly, is that 45 plus spaces is a result of including all the spaces in the train station parking lot, just for clarification, and that's why it shows as a huge surplus.
That's correct.
Okay, it's important to know for perspective.
Any further questions for Mr. Cole before we invite the petitioners? Okay. Is the petitioner available?
Matthew Kerouac here, architect for the project.
John Davis here, proprietor.
Gentlemen, before we start the testimony, I'll swear you in. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Thank you. Please proceed.
If it pleases the board, I'd like to let John first state kind of the genesis of this project and his future plans, and then I can go over any architectural details that you might have or questions.
That's fine with us.
Fantastic. Well, you guys know me, John Davis. I'm the proprietor here at Prairie, 91 East Scranton Avenue. Live in town at 710 East Prospect. Just wanted to start with saying we took a risk 6 years ago on Scranton Alley. Today it's a staple in the heart of the CBD. We won the Congress for New Urbanism Award that the village nominated us for, and ultimately found us a home in the hearts of the people who make up our community. This is a chance for us to fulfill a promise that we made, getting a little bit bigger and providing more to our patrons with the comfort of an all-season establishment, a wider selection. I believe with food, spirits, in conjunction with the already successful atmosphere and coffee we provide, a great niche that will be favorable to accept in our village. I'd like to walk you through the GP right now, if we could, real quick. Glenn, do you want to pull that up?
Yeah, sure. You want me to pull up the architectural?
Yeah, I'm going to just do a quick little walkthrough, and then we'll hand it back over to Matthew. And I also want to make a side note. The menu that was submitted is just a placeholder at this time. We do plan on doing a breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Again, it's going to be light eats, nothing strenuous of hood and full kitchen. So we got that plan up. Let's see. Yep. So as you can see, the circle part's there. I just want to walk you through a couple pages down of the actual GP. There you go. That one right there, Glenn, would be great. One up, sorry. Right there. So, as you know, our current situation allows patrons to come down Scranton Alley to the walkway, to the window, to the doors. But we're proposing that we take over 79 and have an entrance on the main street of Scranton, and provide a couple ADA bathrooms compliant to Illinois State Code, access hallway to the current space of 91 where we are through the back, creating a service window in the alley. And that is pretty much it, straightforward. 30 seats is what we're trying to squeeze in there. It probably won't be that many. So at this point, I'd like to hand it over to Matthew and let him take the floor.
Hi again, this is Matthew Kerouac, architect and daily patron of Prairie Espresso. It's my favorite place in Lake Bluff, and I'm very proud to be a part of this project. And I hope the community stands behind this also. You know, John pretty much walked you through what I was going to do. The intent here is simply to expand the award-winning atmosphere that he has so that we can experience that, you know, 4 seasons out of the year. And we see that our patrons would mostly, you know, from May through September, August, October, still stay on the patio side, the alleyway, and then kind of move in the winter months into the interior space or in any other inclement weather. So hopefully the amount of patrons that we have now would carry over into the new space, you know, just during those months where you know, we got inclement weather, but that would serve both areas throughout the year. And I think we're ready for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Matthew. All right, Member Russell.
I'm leafing through my paperwork here, and I only have part of the packet because unfortunately I didn't get a hard copy of the material, but I thought I read digitally earlier today a comment about the intention was that when you were operating the inside space, you weren't going to be operating the outside space. Could you clarify?
Yeah,
that?
absolutely.
Maybe I just misread it.
Absolutely. I don't, I mean, in the winter months, I don't see why would anybody in the right mind would be out in the alley. So, I mean, although I wouldn't like, I don't want to say that it's closed during the winter because I like to keep the option open. But yes, I mean, I think that the majority of our clientele and patrons would transfer from the outside to the inside.
But bottom line then, whenever weather would permit, even if we get a good spell in February, you'd have both areas.
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you for
bet.
that clarification.
You're welcome.
And then is there any dedicated parking spaces in the lot in the back there for this particular space?
I currently have one with Center Avenue Partners. My employees all walk to work, and if they don't, they're parking at the train station where they're supposed to.
So was there a space that was allocated for a separate parking space that was allocated for the bike shop that you're also inheriting, or is your total allocation remaining at 1?
My total allocation is remaining at 1. I have not talked to Ron Osterline about the situation there. We still need to work out the lease once we get it to through the PCZBA meeting.
Okay, well, I don't have any other questions. I'm like everyone. I think we're all concerned about the parking. I think the lunchtime hour is actually worse. I was shocked to see there was some information in the packet that the conclusion was that the dinner hour is worse, because anybody who's been in downtown Lake Bluff during lunch when the weather's nice, it's horrible to find a parking spot.
Sure.
We've kind of gone down, the village has gone down this road, beginning with the Center Avenue Partner project 20 years ago almost, where a huge variation was granted for parking. And I think the reliance has always been that, you know, the people are going to have to walk when we have crowds, and they're going to have to use the train lot.
Right.
I would be very reluctant to vote against this proposal, given all the decisions that have been made in the last 15 years. And the only reason I would vote against it is because of the lack of parking allocations. But we've been walking this line for a long time now. This is in reality a pretty small space. I was surprised, John, when you made the comment that you're hoping to get 30 seats inside, because the graphic depiction there shows 15, and usually those graphics already exaggerated. So,
but you know, I like to pack them in.
Okay, standing room only, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. But to address that, Chairman, you know, I do think that parking will always be an issue in a town that's successful like we have here. I understand the fear of not having enough parking spots to accommodate, but you know, I do believe that we are net neutral on the topic, as we currently have an SUP that allows us seating of 42, while the indoor space will only be providing, you know, maximum 30. The summers here have always been great in our current location, but early fall numbers fall off drastically as the cold creeps in. So, you know, the new space will only allow the current patrons to have a place to go when the outside seating area is too cold to bear. So, you know, moving forward, I think also after being here 6 years, I know the majority, I would say 70% of my clientele is walkers in the east neighborhood. So, you know, I do understand that the concern is.
Okay, I don't have any other questions. Just a final comment that I'd like the village maybe to look into this issue of why, you know, we don't sign and make it clear to people looking for parking spaces in the downtown, why those spaces on Oak to the north of Scranton, between Scranton and North. You drive down there and it does look like they may be private spaces because they pull up pretty close to the apartments that are there. But indeed, I think they are public, and I would think we would want to make that clear to invite people to park there if indeed they are public, and not leave the law-abiding citizens questioning whether or not they should pull in. Any space that we have that is open and that people should be allowed to use, I think we ought to make it clear they can use them. And then, you know, 15 years ago, the village made a very, very gutsy decision to buy all the property along Block 1 adjacent to the village market when the town was totally dead. And that decision, you know, totally turned the town around. And I'd just like to echo the personal sentiment that I hope that the village is at least exploring the idea of doing something similar with Block 3, where they could control the development and have a public parking lot of some size, not advocating by any means the whole space, but you know, a reasonably sized development there with public parking. You know, it's a massive decision to make because it's millions of dollars, but anyway, that's my thoughts. Thank you.
If I could respond real quick just to the parking, you know, I think that we should celebrate as a village that we have a parking problem downtown, especially in these economic times, that we have such a robust downtown area. I think that's a testament to the quality of the stores and the restaurants. So I do celebrate that we have this issue, and I'm hoping for a solution also. I also want to look at, if this space remains empty, what type of retailer would come into this. We know that retail is kind of a dying, you know, rental proprietor these days. And if anything, there's going to probably be someone else coming in with some type of restaurant idea or food and beverage. And I think being able to expand one concept into the other with a known entity that has kind of an established patronage. It's a positive. You're not bringing someone else onto the.
How's it going? Did you say no?
What's it? You're on camera.
Am I?
Yeah. Excuse me.
that's all I have on that.
Thank you. Member Danley.
Well, you know, after reading the letters and reading this proposal and knowing that it's such a jewel in our community, I'd like to sort of stay on point that we're only looking at this application and not our other issue about parking stalls. So I don't have any issue other than I would hope that we would encourage the support that, you know, he's brought to our town and what we have in our community. So I don't have anything further really to talk about other than I really hope and urge that we continue the conversation separate than this applicant about the parking, or perhaps unfortunate that the bike shop is closed because we should all be riding more bikes. But, or walking to our Prairie Espresso.
Thank you, Member Danley. Member Ryder.
Yes, I too support the petition. I do so recognizing the work that's gone in already to this this establishment and appreciating it. I further think that if we were to leave this space vacant, we would not net improve our parking situation such as it is, assuming another establishment would want to go in there. I think probably Prairie Espresso has less parking associated with it, given the reasons that Mr. Davis identified, than maybe some other establishments would. So I agree with Member Danley that the issues are separate. I recognize the concerns of the downtown business owners, and appreciate what Mr. Kerouac said regarding celebrating that success. I would also point out that, you know, if one were to walk in Chicago for 2 blocks to park their car, they think they got a great spot. If they were going to a restaurant downtown, it would, you know, the notion that that we absolutely must have more parking now east of the downtown when we have parking west of the downtown on, you know, the train station seems questionable to me, but as Jill said, it's not today's issue. I would approve this petition.
Thank you, Member Ryder. Member Burns.
Yeah, I agree with all the comments. I'm very supportive of successful businesses, and I would hate for parking to go in the way. It just seems ridiculous that you slow down progress for what we want as a vital downtown by just stifling them, saying, no, you can't do that, and rather have vacant spaces. So I'm supportive of it. I do believe we need to continue the discussion, or at least the board needs to continue discussion to work through the parking or perceived parking issue. No, I'm supportive of it.
Thank you, Member Burns. Member Miller.
I concur with my associates, everything that's been said. I think parking is probably less of an issue with this particular business since it's an established business. They've already used up their parking spaces. They may need a few more if they become even more successful, which we hope. And I feel the village is the responsible party for parking, but I don't think that should be a hindrance in improving our local economy at this stage. We don't know what's going to come in its place. It will probably be worse for parking.
Thank you, Member Miller. Mr. Davis, what are you contemplating as to the hours of operation?
Mr. Davis, I believe you're still muted.
Sorry about that. Right now we're contemplating Monday through Thursday, 7 to 10, Friday, Saturday till midnight. And then Sunday, we'd like to be open till 10 again. I mean, these are all just placeholders for me. I'm happy to hear from you guys. I just know that I don't want to snooker myself into a position where I can't stay open because I didn't ask.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
You're welcome.
Is the hours on the weekend, you said till midnight, Friday and Saturday?
Friday and Saturday, yes, that's correct.
Is that compatible with the other businesses on the block?
I believe that Gary Lawrence is the only one that has it on Saturday, when his English pub was approved. And then there's a couple other establishments up in Lake Effect Holdings on Block 1.
It says 11 midnight, I see. Okay. We have precedent, that's fine.
Any comment from the public, Mr. Cole? I mean, other than the 4 letters that have been incorporated into the record.
Sure. So I do see a number of people present who may wish to comment based on testimony received so far. If you're joining us by Zoom, you can use the Q&A function down at the bottom, and we'll take those in the order received. If no one wishes to speak, we can continue on with the hearing.
How do we handle the swearing in?
I think it would make sense just to swear them in one at a time.
Okay.
And we do have one person ready to speak with us, Miss Denise Petticord. If you will unmute your microphone, you're able to talk to us.
Yes, hi, thank you for the opportunity to comment. My comment relates to the hours of operation, and I first have a question that to confirm that the outdoor space would remain no later than 10 p.m. to be open for Prairie Espresso?
That's correct.
Okay, great, thank you. And then just questioning or commenting as I look at the hours of operation for the restaurants and bars in town, there is inconsistency between the 11 p.m. and midnight. If I look at what's on this block, Innovasi, for example, is 11 p.m.
No, that's correct. Correct observation.
So as a resident that lives close by, I'm more supportive of the earlier close time, the 11 p.m. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public, Mr. Cole?
I'm not seeing anyone, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion among the commissioners?
Just a follow-up question for Mr. Cole. Glenn, do you, because I don't recall, do you remember, since Lawrence English Pub only has an allowance until 11 p.m. on Friday, did they just request until 11 p.m.? As I heard this, they're requesting, the current applicants requesting till midnight. And the same question would be for Innovasi also. Did we cut them back an hour? Or did they not want to go till midnight?
I'm less familiar with Innovasi. That's been out there for quite some time, at least 10 years or so. In the Lawrence English Pub, that one, you'll remember there was considerable discussion at the Plan Commission, especially due to the arrangement of egress and that outdoor patio and the condominiums being just across the driveway to the south, or the pedestrian walkway to the south. I don't think they were pared back an hour. Certainly, I think the 10 p.m. outdoor limit was created at the Plan Commission to be an additional restriction. I don't think they were originally seeking midnight on Friday or on Sunday. But if you can give me a couple minutes, I can probably tell you definitively.
Well, while you're looking, Glenn, it would make no sense to me that we would allow this current applicant to operate till midnight on Friday if we did indeed deny it to either Lawrence English Pub or on the other side, Innovasi. The places are all within 100 feet of one another.
I would echo your concern there, Mr. Russell. I think we definitely should be consistent.
Right. I've got their application handy for you. So as you can see, let me put these both up side by side. That might be a little easier. A complicated set of operating hours. So we can see here, we simplified it almost a little bit. Noon to 11, earlier than 4 p.m. or 2 p.m., 11 as requested. Friday, they were pulled back an hour from midnight to 11. Saturday, 7 to 10 to the midnight is as requested. And Sunday, 2 to 11, and it looks like you pulled them back an hour there as well.
Looking at this, it seems we should be more consistent and make Friday no later than 11, based on what we've approved in the past.
I concur.
Any other comments among the commissioners with respect to the Friday night cutoff, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I do from a consistency perspective. I don't know if I recall the conversation of pulling it back on Friday, but I do think, we've got two other businesses in this similar boat, and I think consistency is important in this regard.
I think one neighbor who has an apartment opposite the pub came forth with a request, will not allow it to be beyond 11 o'clock. Her apartment faces the pub. I think we acknowledged her wishes and cut it back to 11 as a compromise. We kept Saturday at 12.
And that may have been Ms. Petishard when the Lawrence petition was before us. Any further discussion among the commissioners or any other questions for the petitioner?
Can I respond to the hours just on behalf of our side? I do think, this is Matthew Kerouac. I do think that the conditions are different, and I totally understand. And I was at that board meeting hearing about the concerns of the apartment building when people spilling out of the pub. But here we would have people just going onto Scranton Avenue and not towards the residential, which is a very confined, and they're right on top of each other. I appreciate the consistency, but they are two different scenarios.
There's residential above some of these buildings on Scranton.
Yeah, there's residential above Innovasi, all around that. And I've never heard any complaints from anybody that lives above Innovasi that spills out from several different exits on that area. So I don't know if we can really compare at this point. And especially because the pub was directly adjacent or above or near the condos. So I don't know. I'm all for encouraging our town to be vibrant and not feel like we're the same throughout. So that's just a personal opinion on my end. What about Maverly's? Isn't that a later date? I know there's no residential above it, but I guess the closest thing we can compare is in Innovasi with residential above, right?
Yeah, so some of this property, the Center Avenue Partners property, does have residential. I believe, again, more towards the Innovasi end of it. I'm not too familiar with the top floor of that building, although we have a floor plan available. In the Lawrence building, adjacent to the east, there are residential tenants directly next to the alley up and on the east side of that alley.
Glenn and Chair Peters, I'm sorry I have to step out, but I'll just say one last time that because of the hours for the English pub and Innovasi and the number of residents that are much closer, that we should stick to the 11 o'clock time for Friday and give some nod to the apartment dwellers right above these facilities. People could spill out of this new facility and sit around the tables in the alley and be outside creating noise very close to these apartments. So I just think it's more equitable to keep it at 11 on Friday. But I unfortunately have to step out.
Thank you, Member Russell. Any further discussion among the commissioners with respect to the proposed hours? And I think we're focusing on the Friday evening closing hour. Okay. Hearing none. Any further comments from the petitioner?
No, I'm good.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Thank you.
All right. Are we in a position to have a motion, please?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, if I understand, certainly the motion may differ. It sounds like the consensus of the group is that the hours would be 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. all days except Saturday. You would go to 7 a.m. to midnight on Saturday, and then we would preserve the existing condition that the pedestrian walkway, restaurant operate no later than 10 p.m. And again, if we're making a motion, I would suggest that include we would continue to apply all those existing conditions of their current special use permit.
I do have one more comment I'd like to make. We're seeking to amend the current SUP and ask for outdoor amplification for music, similar to what Innovasi has on the sidewalk for the alley. I know that I do not currently have it, and it's something that I'd like to be able to provide. So I'm fine with keeping the hours the way they are, but I'd like to amend that if possible.
And that's with respect to the proposed new facility or the existing facility?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure if we are combining the special use permit into one, seeing as it's gonna be one place more or less. But it would be the existing SUP.
It's a separate issue, isn't it? I don't know if we should address it now.
I don't know. I was thinking with the remodel and elevation of the existing space, I thought we would incorporate that at the same time, because we're going to be taking away.
Go ahead. Sorry.
It's okay. We're going to be taking away the doors and doing a service window. So it kind of does change the face of the existing space.
By way of clarification, so I don't believe there's high level, all of the different restaurants on this property all are technically under one special use, right? So Innovasi, Cache, Bonk, and Prairie Espresso are all part of one approval. And we would put this in there as well. There's no prohibition against outdoor sound in the special use permit per se. There is a provision in there that talks about special events. So you'll recall that the idea of the walkway restaurant, it's the size of a shoe closet. There's no room to prepare food in there. And so there's a provision in the SUP that allows Mr. Davis to bring in outside catering, outside food preparation with the village administrator's approval upon receiving a special event plan. I'll put that up on the screen. Typically, you know, because there is adjacent residential, our standard language has said not to add any amplification there on the site. So I believe that might be what Mr. Davis is referring to.
I am, and I guess if you know the same applies with the hours, in the sense that Innovasi has outdoor amplification and there's residentials across the street as well. So I'm just looking to amend that. Yeah.
Mr. Schuster, procedurally, where are we at on that issue?
So, I mean, I guess let me refer to this question back to Glenn. Two questions. I mean, is there anything, you indicated that there's nothing in the special use permit that needs an amendment for that?
I don't believe so, no.
So I don't know that it's relief that we have to give specifically. If it's not prohibited as a condition of the special use, I don't know that we need additional relief. And to the extent it is, if it was prohibited, I don't believe that was part of the application. Am I correct with that as well, Glenn?
Yeah, let me double check. I don't recall that being in there.
But I mean, again, I mean, if there's no condition prohibiting it, I don't know that you need a permission from the village to do it.
I would wonder, is there a general guideline or a constraint on, you know, the level of the music? I think that may be the question here. So, you know, if there's no prohibition of amplification, I mean, you could have kind of background music on, but if you wanted to have a louder music, is there a limit before it qualifies for a special event, or something that would go beyond a certain, you know, noise restriction? Because I think that may be, you know, relevant, but I guess I'm not familiar enough with what is allowable without having specifically said this is what's allowed. Because you're saying there's nothing prohibiting it, but what does that permit? I don't know. I'm not clear on that.
So we do have in our village code is a nuisance offensive noises. So if you're disturbing the peace of a quiet neighborhood, you can be cited for a nuisance under our code. So I think the first issue with amplification and sound is it depends on how loud it is. If it's background music, that's not an issue. If it's something that's not disturbing the peace, it's not an issue. If there's, whether it's called a special event or not, if you are going to amplify sound in a way that's disturbing, that is prohibited by our code. Now, in terms of a special event, if we're talking about amplification to be used on a regular basis, this certainly, I don't think, qualifies as a special event. So, you know, if amplification is not prohibited, which I don't see it as a prohibition in the ordinance, then there's no relief required, and so long as the amplification is put in a manner that's consistent with the plans previously approved, and it doesn't, you know, you're drastically changing the site plan in any manner, somebody's allowed to do it, whether it's, you know, putting in speakers, you know, above the coffee bar, or of something that's a little more intricate. As long as, again, we don't have excessive noise, it would be allowed.
Thank you, Mr. Schuster. Any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none, is there a motion, please?
Okay, I'll make a motion. Nobody else is doing it, that we approve the plan as provided, that with the change of the hours to 11 o'clock, closing on Friday.
Thank you, Member Miller. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Thank you, Member Burns. And in this case, we're a recommending body. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I believe you did have one more. I'm not sure when it came in. You did have one more request from the public to comment.
Okay.
If you'd like to take it.
Yes, if you could state your name for the record, please, and then we'll swear you in.
Hi, this is Denise Petticourt again.
Yes, Denise, do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
So, yes, and I had raised my hand earlier. I don't know why it didn't come through or get picked up. And it's just one comment that I do have on, I know that it sounds like there's not an approval that can or has to be given around the outdoor music system in the open space of Prairie. But I think that is a little bit different than where it exists in front of a restaurant like Innovasi, that the Prairie Espresso area is really, you know, the open walkway. And so I think that the sound really travels in all directions from that, versus where you have a restaurant and it's really just in that immediate area where people are sitting. And so I would like the board to consider that as part of this request.
Thank you. Procedurally, obviously we're dealing with potential nuisance if the sound is of any significant level of decibels, but that's covered by the village code. Is there a caveat, or should a restriction be placed with respect to the variation or special use?
So to some extent, kind of a little flat-footed here. I mean, as a high-level comment, I would say that the operations for the walkway restaurant aren't really proposed to change, and so I think it would make sense not to change the conditions on those operations. I mean, certainly if John's request is just that when he brings bands in, that they be allowed to, you know, bring in amplification equipment with them. certainly, I think the existing special event process that's provided could accommodate that. We just haven't done that too much in the past. Although, for example, when Croy is out there in the back, that group uses amplified sound equipment. Yeah.
Any further discussion with respect to the sound issue or potential issue? Any further discussion with respect to the pending motion? Hearing none, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. You do have an additional request to address the board again from Ms. Petticord.
Okay.
If you'd like to take it.
Yeah, please proceed, ma'am.
Oh, she has withdrawn. I apologize.
Okay.
I'm sorry, could you restate the motion? I just rejoined the meeting.
Back. Mr. Schuster, does anything that would prevent Mr. Russell from voting in this matter?
The vote has not has not occurred yet, so he could join in.
Okay.
Mr. Schuster, if you could restate the motion for the benefit of Mr. Russell, please.
The motion, I have it, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's moved to recommend approval of the application subject to, was it the 11 o'clock time limit outside?
Friday.
On Friday.
Thank you.
All right. We could have a roll call vote, please.
Certainly. Member Russell.
Aye.
Member Ryder.
Aye.
Member Burns.
Aye.
Member Miller.
Aye.
Member Danley.
Aye.
Chair Peters.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Next steps for Mr. Davis?
Yes, so this item will be on the, most likely on the September 28th Village Board agenda for creating consideration. We'll be in contact probably about this time next week.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Thank you.
Mr. Kerouac, before you leave, I did want to invite you to stick around for our next item if you like.
I will do. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Agenda item number 7. Mr. Cole, if you could give us an overview, please.
Certainly. So you'll remember that at your last meeting and for the last couple months, we've spent some time talking about accessory dwelling units. So coach house, granny flats, in-house suites, they have many names, but they're referring essentially to the same thing. Based on the Plan Commission, or PCZBA's comments, I should say, at the last meeting, we've revised that policy outline to address some of those concerns. We shared that with the Architectural Board of Review earlier this month, and so that's actually why I invited Mr. Kerouac to stay around as a member of the ABR. I would say at the ABR level, a few comments initially. I believe that the chairman commented that it would be difficult to build these within the scope of the village's existing structures and bulk regulations, which I think is known to us. We also brought this to the village board at a committee of the whole. I think there may be some desire, if this group is ready, to probably have a joint workshop with them on that. If there's the comfort level of doing so. A couple of the comments raised at the village board level were about form, so specifically looking at, you'll remember one of our discussion points last month was, if you have a ranch house, is it permissible that you would perhaps have a 2-story accessory dwelling unit in the back, which is really one story for a garage and then one story for the living space. So one member of the board expressed some, wanted to see some deeper consideration of that. There was some discussion around the impact of public services. And again, I think, but overall, an interest in the concept and an appreciation for some of the work this body has done, and looking closely at that and looking at our alternative housing policies generally. So the memo walks through a few of these hanging on bullet points from last month. I would say this is mostly a cleanup memo, if you would. For minimum rental length, we're in looking at it, we know that you can certainly limit it to 30 days. The ability to require longer minimum rental periods past that is unclear. We can have the village attorney continue to look at that specifically if there's a consensus among the group to be more restrictive there, and if so, as to a specific time. Water and sewer service, we basically, as the village, have the ability to mandate what we'd like to do there. We have at this point, no recommendation from staff as to what you would require. There are so many forms. I think we would want to preserve the ability to set that at the time of a building permit. We're also asked about tree regulations. Right now, a detached unit could not qualify for that tree fee bonus. An attached unit possibly could. Again, those are the regulations in place today. We also, I can walk through it in more detail if you like, but we walked a bit in the memo through our methodology for calculating the impact of public services for a subdivision and how that would perhaps apply to accessory dwelling units. That's a bit of a muddy picture. I think unless you were to take some affirmative action, I don't think that would apply to accessory dwelling units today. Certainly you could look at doing so, but we could not find another community that does so. And certainly estimating that impact because of some measurement considerations is difficult. The best data we have says that the number of people involved is small, but that's a small sample from a very different part of the country, and so it's hard to generalize that. So I would say overall, our goal as staff today is to see if there are any other remaining questions out there, if these adjustments to the outline have matched up with the concerns we discussed last month, and then after we have answers to those questions, we can talk about next steps.
With respect to the tree preservation regulation and the potential impact, if an ADU was permitted, would there be an erosion of the tree ordinance? Or would, if it's a part of the existing structure, it would be treated the same way as the tree ordinance currently operates?
That's correct. So today, if you are building a completely conforming addition to an existing structure, any trees you'd have to take out within the footprint of that addition ordinarily are discounted by 50%. If you're a landmark property, that would be fully waived. If you're building a detached structure, you have to pay for those straight. And so unless you were to request something different or direct us to prepare something different, if you just adopt the regulations in this outline that you've been presented, the same rules would apply. So attached ADU would receive that discount. A detached rear yard structure would pay the full fare.
I appreciate that, Mr. Cole, because from my perspective, I would not want to see any erosion to our tree ordinance. Any other comments from the commissioners with respect to Mr. Cole's memo?
I have some questions in the height section, the new draft of the height regulations.
And actually, Member Russell, I forgot a very important part, if I can jump in for a second. Very, very important is in thinking about these form considerations and especially height. One more thing coming out of the Architectural Board of Review is that Edward Deegan, who's a member there and of course a residential architect in town, has agreed to prepare a few case studies, if you would, a mini design charrette, looking at 3 examples of how these could be built, perhaps on 3 different lots in the village. And so we're hoping to have that in a couple weeks. You could consider it at whatever the next step is for that. I apologize, Member Russell, that was just very important to what I suspect your comment will be.
No, that's great to hear. I'd love to participate in that. I just wanted to offer a few clarifications. You've added a diagram in the height section on page 2 of 4.
Mm-hmm.
That height diagram on the right side calls out a building height. And that's really the mean building height, what you're showing there, not the building height. So that's an error in the diagram, just so everybody understands that. And then
Yep.
the average existing grade line is actually the average finished grade line based on scaling your grades from left to right there. You'll see we don't need to clean that up tonight, but you'll see that doesn't make sense other than as the finished grade. I also still worried about the height of these detached structures in the rear corner of yards. I know last week I had quickly commented that I'd probably be more in favor of 23 or 24 feet. The one shape that does concern me is a flat roof type of structure that has much more appearance bulk-wise. And I'd be in favor of, if there's a flat roof 2-story unit being built in the rear yard, that the height for that be 21 feet. That would allow 2 9-foot ceilings, foot for the floor between the first and second floor, a foot for the roof structure, and then a foot to play with at grade. You know, aesthetically, normally these would not be very appealing. They're going to take up a much wider width across the back, butting up against someone else's property on the other side of the rear property line. I personally, for flat roof structures, want to push for a limit like 21 instead of including them with the 24 absolute height for all the others. Just as one thought on height, if anybody agrees with that. And then the only other thing.
If I could, so in drafting this, my expectation would be, you have, these are cumulative restrictions, right? So if you have a flat roof, the mean height of that flat roof is the roof height. And so we can clarify this more if it's not clear, but as this is written today, I would read that to mean that flat roof couldn't cross 20 feet. You would not be able to go up to 24.
Okay, well, I didn't even look at it from the aspect of mean height. I was looking at it from overall building height. So, because we talk about mean. So anyway, I just think the flat roof structure, however it works out in the end, I think it needs to be minimized to the extent possible and still allow for that second story so that, we can allow these things. And then I disagree in your commentary section, right opposite that drawing, you have the sentence, it would also move buildings exceeding 17 feet further away from the rear lot lines. Once again, if you orient a certain structure, a gable-ended structure with the regulations as proposed, you could have that, the peak, a 24-foot peak, right at 5 feet off the lot line. We could crank out examples that could show that. So I just disagree with that comment.
And if I could respond, so that's subsection D in very few words, is trying to speak exactly to what you're referring to. So if you are crossing the height limit in the district, you have your daylight planes, which would come up 12 feet and then in. And so this would say that if you are crossing the height restriction under this exception, off the rear line too, you'd have to come 12 feet up and then in. So
No, but there's a
tall structure. Go ahead.
Glenn, there's an exception in the code for gable-ended sides where you can have 20 feet of the gable end, a 20-foot length, penetrate the daylight plane. If you look at the exception provisions, I mean, we don't need to debate that detail tonight because it sounds like we're going to have more workshops, but I know I had forwarded you one very, very rough sketch really quickly a couple of weeks ago. We never got to talk about it, but
for those of you who couldn't see Mr. Russell's excellent sketch, it looked like a dunce hat that I believe I was intended to put on my head for not grasping the concept without a sketch.
Well, I think that was my, as far as things stand tonight, I think that was my only comment, although I would be interested in hearing, you know, hearing about a rental term length that exceeds the current proposed minimum of 30 days, depending on where that shakes out legally.
Thank you, Member Russell. Member Ryder.
I'm in favor of these proposals. I think an additional workshop would make sense. I think as to the minimum length of rental, I'm satisfied with 30 days. Understanding that there's only so much that Attorney Schuster can do to clarify the law. If it's not clear, it's not clear. And so I think we could go with 30 days, and would be very, very unlikely that we would get a lot of abuse of that or misuse of that. And so rather than study it further, I'm comfortable with 30 days.
Thank you.
And Chair Peters, if I may.
Certainly.
Thank you. Just to clarify on the number of days, there's a general proposition under zoning law that you can't generally treat rentals different than home ownership. There is, for example, there was a case in a community a couple decades ago that tried to create a zoning district in which they said you have to own the home, no rental allowed whatsoever. And the courts threw that out and said that is arbitrary. Somebody puts their head down on the pillow the same way, whether they rent a home or they own a home, it's the same use. So whether you own it or rent it, yeah, that would be an arbitrary distinction. Now, there is some room to have minimum durations of stay, and we've tackled this before in short-term rental ordinance, particularly in what's common is prohibiting rentals less than 30 days or treating them differently as the short-term rental, because the use of a property when you're there for less than 30 days is different than if you're there for longer. Now, the question of where what's permitted and what is not, whether it's 30 days, 60 days, 6 months, a year, in the Illinois case law, based on what I've seen, there is not a lot of case law out there. 30 days, we can clearly say you can't use one of these for 30 days. That is not a problem. Those types of durations have been upheld before in the courts. I am unaware of a case where courts have decided on a 60-day, 90-day, or longer minimum duration of stay. And one argument would be, if we are too aggressive about it, would be somebody could buy a home and nothing prohibits them from selling it and moving out in 30 days or 60 days. So why are we treating people who rent differently? So could we do minimum durations that are 60 days or 90 days or something longer? Perhaps, you know, but it's not like there's clear case law for us, you know, where we can give you an opinion that, so, you know, it would be definitely legal and permitted. You know, and if somebody wanted to challenge it, you know, it would be a case of first impression. So that's kind of how that works. I'm happy to answer any other questions people may have.
Thank you, Mr. Schuster. Member Danley.
I don't have any other issue right now, other than I know that this is going to be ongoing. I am concerned, similar to what Commissioner Russell had mentioned about the backyard and just having such lots so close together in our small community. I am concerned about that. I'd love to just see some examples, or, you know, have a little bit more visual aid to really understand how that would impact a neighbor. But generally, obviously, I'm all for moving forward with this and trying to make this implemented in our community. But that to me is just something that I just want to know more about, and perhaps see some examples of how that could lay out.
And quite possibly Mr. Deegan's proposals or drafts or sketches might assist us in that regard going forward.
Certainly. I'd also say, if you like, Mr. Kerouac has stayed with us. I don't know if he wants to offer any comments or not, but at some point we can ask him as well.
Well, why don't we, that'd be fine, Mr. Kerouac, if you'd like to provide us with your input, and then we'll go back to the commissioners.
Matt, you're able to talk.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great, thanks. I said, besides Mr. Deegan making me look bad by not offering my services for this exercise, maybe I'll talk to him about that. We'll have a little competition, who can do the better ones. I would say I deal with this a little bit in Wilmette, and with the flat roof, you know, they have a definition of anything less than 3 and 12 is a flat roof, so that there's no discrepancy there. It might be helpful to define what a flat roof is, and that makes a big difference in what you can do. I know I've come up against that, and I do think that in Evanston, I've done a couple of these, and the difference is in Evanston, that's an alley-based, you know, city, whereas we have very limited alleys. So we are dealing separately, you know, to Ms. Stanley's concern, that we're, you know, very much, I have 3 backyards on my backyard because of the way that I'm on near a corner. So I have people all around me, backyards. So, you know, one structure could impact 4 separate homes. I'm all for it. I think we need some different type of housing. You know, we've been fighting for that for a long time here. But it is a daunting challenge to kind of fit it within our framework of what our village is, and do it with care that we try to do with everything else that we do here. And it is a challenge because in Evanston, they did not change their building height. So we're trying to squeeze these coach houses below 18 feet, which was an accessory structure. And it became very unsuccessful. So the concerns are valid, what have been brought up, and I've faced most of those. And you know, I look forward to working with the board to try to resolve these. And I'm sure the rest of the ABR would be the same.
No, thank you very much. Member Miller.
Seems like the more we deal with this, the more questions we have. I think we need more expertise than what this particular committee can supply us to. side George as to what's feasible. I mean, I agree. If with these in the east side of the village, you got all these garages in the back, and stick another story on the garage. I mean, that's pretty intrusive to the people around them. It's a much easier dilemma if you're in the estate district or maybe on the west side. I know the bulk ordinance will take care of a lot of this because most of the homes probably already bulked out. You can't put much of an addition on anything on the east side. But this is a road, and I certainly wouldn't rush into anything at this point. I think maybe we should meet with the ABR as a group and get their opinion and put up some legitimate numbers based on the size of lots. Maybe we have to change it, adjust it based on the size of the lot rather than, just going by a general bulk wilderness or FAR.
No, thank you, Member Miller. Member Burns.
So I'm generally supportive of this and would like to move it forward. And I think we do need to have further conversations because it doesn't, we've had a couple situations where we've not aligned with the board on some issues. And I think it would be beneficial to meet together with them to talk through some of these things. So, we can kind of come to a consensus. And I think it's worthy of discussion, but I'm not too concerned about some of these height restrictions for the point you brought up, Elliot, and that is just the bulk ordinance in these smaller lots. I'm sure there are some examples where you could build up an existing structure in the back, but I think many of the properties are fully built out, and I guess I just don't see a ton of those happening, and it would be good to have the numbers. I hate to put work on you, Glenn, but it'd be interesting to see how many would be available to really build a substantial story over a garage. I can't imagine. I would assume many of the opportunities will be using existing space and just repurposing it maybe in a way. But I don't know. It's a good question. I think it's worthy of discussion. I'm not super concerned about it. I like the changes that you've made, Glenn, in this draft in terms of the heights. Makes sense to me. But I do believe a workshop with the board would be helpful. And we still haven't gotten public comment either. So I don't want to rush through it and get the public comment, but that may also inform some things as well. So I don't want to kind of be paralysis by analysis and keep thinking about it and wondering or whatever. We do need to get some public comment on this. So I'm up for a workshop, discuss with the board, and then come up with a proposal and see how it goes with the best of our abilities.
Yeah, thank you, Member Burns. Glenn, we're contemplating a possible workshop with the board and/or with the ABR?
Yeah, so what I would say is no matter what, whatever course of action we choose here, I'm happy to go back to the ABR at their meeting next month here in a couple of weeks to see if there's any additional thoughts. Hopefully by then, Mr. Deegan's sketches will be ready, or perhaps Mr. Kerouac's if he's feeling ambitious. And so we'll share those, of course, with the group as well when you're ready. I guess what I would say is if, there's still some fine details to be fleshed out, certainly about height and about some of these smaller lots. Certainly, I would think Mr. Deegan's studies may add to that. If, we're comfortable with 80 to, 80-ish, 90-ish% of how this thing works and functions, I would say, a good next step would be to meet with the board, perhaps to make that, we'll invite the Architectural Board of Review members to that as well. You don't have to have everything nailed down at that point, but that might be the right course of action to keep this moving and to keep soliciting feedback from others in the community.
No, I think from my perspective, that's certainly a reasonable approach. I think the input we received from Mr. Deegan and maybe Mr. Kerouac will certainly be beneficial. We have not seen any data yet as to what the percentage or number of lots in the various districts may be available for ADU. I guess I would reiterate my concerns, my position, and that is, as I've reflected earlier, that a special use permit should be required, and that's my personal opinion, with respect to any such proposal in all districts but the CE, E1, and E2. I'm just not convinced yet that the village of Lake Bluff is ready for this type of expansion, so to speak. And I'm not necessarily aligned with the section on the upper right-hand corner of page 3, the quadrant there. But again, certainly open to discussion. I think the expertise of the ABR and the expertise and guidance from the village board will be very, very important before we have a public hearing.
Okay. With that said, I suppose, I'm not sure if there are any commissioner comments before I conclude. Getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, no. Any further comments from the commissioners?
So we'll plan, when we have those case studies, certainly we'll circulate those to you separately. I think if I'm hearing the consensus right, we won't plan to put this on your agenda until we have some scheduling for a workshop, hopefully in the next 30, 60 days at the long end. So stay tuned.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Cole. Agenda item number 9, staff report.
Certainly. So I believe the village attorney want to make a report this evening.
Yes, I had 2 things. The first one I wanted to discuss was just kind of just our procedure, and just have a recommendation, which is just to remember that when we have a public hearing before us, it starts with the staff report from Glenn, then the applicant does their presentation, and then after that is your opportunity to ask questions. Then you go from your questions to the public presentation for anybody who has testimony from the public. And one thing, and then once we're done with the public hearing, then there's the deliberations, and then you make your motion and vote. And one of the things I would recommend to be careful on is not doing your deliberations at the beginning of the hearing, where you're discussing, I think we should do this, they should do that, I'm in favor of this, I'm opposed to this application, at the very beginning, because you have yet to receive all the evidence from the applicants and all the evidence from anybody who is going to come before you as a member of the public who may be in opposition. And so you don't want to make it seem like it's a foregone conclusion before you have the evidence. And I know, of course, you're not doing that. You do a great job of always listening and giving everybody an opportunity to speak, which is the way it should be done. But that's something you may want to keep in mind as part of your public hearings, is to limit the deliberation until after everybody's presented everything before you. I don't know if anybody has any questions about that procedure, but I'm happy to respond to any if you do.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Schuster.
Okay. The other item to report on, because I know that you've asked before, but I have more information I can report on tonight on the litigation involving the Stonebridge property. So I believe at the last meeting you asked, or 2 meetings ago, and I mentioned that we're in litigation, and so I wasn't going to really comment. And I will start off by saying we are still in litigation and it's not over yet. However, that said, there was a court hearing last week in which the judge ruled on motions to dismiss 2 cases. So the posture of the litigation, just so you're aware, is that the owners of the Stonebridge property Stonebridge came forward, brought a 5-count lawsuit against the village, primarily seeking rescission of the development agreement, saying that they should be let out of their contractual obligations to construct the property, you know, that they had committed to build, and that was part of the, it was approved as part of a planned residential development. They also sought, as part of that, to be let out of their obligation to post a letter of credit with the village to ensure the public improvements that they were required to construct. The court ruled, the village filed a motion to dismiss those, the complaint, and the court ruled in favor of the village and dismissed without prejudice those counts, saying that they had not satisfied their grounds for rescission of the development agreement. The judge said that they are able, if they would like, within 30 days to try again and replead the case. But based on this hearing, we have prevailed up until this point, and we will wait to see what happens next in the litigation. The other piece of this litigation involved a fence that was required to be maintained on the property that was not maintained, then removed from the property, and a chain link fence was put up. The village brought an enforcement action for various violations of the village code and plan development ordinance, and Stonebridge tried to have that dismissed, and the judge rejected their arguments and ruled in favor of the village on those counts. So if anybody has any questions, you know, I'm happy to share what I can. You know, again, we'll caveat it by it's still an active litigation, so I'm going to be a little circumspect in what I say, but happy to answer questions.
And of course, this is perhaps a matter that may one day come back before you.
Yes, probably less said the better from the commissioners on the issue, but we certainly appreciate the update, Mr. Schuster.
So one additional bit of staff report, you'll notice there is a unfamiliar face up there on the screen. That is Miss Allie Caskey, who, of course, you all know Sam Lennox, who's the village's graduate intern. Miss Caskey is our undergraduate intern for the moment from Lake Forest College, studying sustainable planning. Allie, do you want to give yourself a bit more of an introduction?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I've been taking the minutes all night. As Glenn mentioned, I'm a senior at Lake Forest College. I'm studying economics and sustainable planning with an interest in community development. So this has been a particularly fun meeting, but thank you for all having me. Thanks, Glenn.
Welcome.
Certainly, I think there'd be a lot of opportunity.
That would conclude my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Commissioners report.
What's on the agenda for next week, so far?
I'm not aware of anything at this time as far as applications.
All right. Well, we covered a lot of ground this evening, and I think very, very efficiently, so thank you. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Yeah.
All in favor? Or roll call?
We can do the roll call.
Roll call.
Member Russell?
Aye.
Member Burns?
Aye.
Member Danley?
Aye.
Member Miller?
Aye.
Member Ryder?
Aye.
Chair Peters?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and have a great evening to everybody.
Aye.
You too.
Bye. You too.
Aye.